Hey, John Gilroy here. The world is full of confusing terms. You got multimodal, you got multi-cloud, you got hybrid cloud. Today, we sit down with Nutanix and break through the clouds to find out about mission success. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is Greg O'Connell, Vice President Federal at a company called Nutanix, Nutanix. Greg, how are you?
Doing wonderful, John. Thanks for having me.
I didn't want to spell it out, but I remember 10 years ago when you folks opened up that building in Tyson's. It was like 200 or 300 people there. There's all kinds of special lighting, and that was your first foray to the federal government. And now you become pretty well known, haven't you?
Here we are. Yeah, absolutely. We're no longer thought of as a high fiber cereal. That's what everyone used to mix us up with our name.
maybe with Make America Healthy Again, maybe you should change the logo to that, huh? Well, the reason I brought you in is because you folks had a study that came out over the summer. It's called the ECI report. I think that is a pretty good pulse of what's going on in the federal government. I thought we'd talk about that. And maybe for people out there who are new to the federal government, maybe you can position yourself and show exactly how you can break through all these confusing terms with multi and hybrid and everything else. And I think, you can use every term in the world, but the idea is success and hitting the mission goals. And if you're not going to hit the mission goals, all those fancy terms are kind of useless. So maybe act like you just came here from Rwanda and you don't know about Nutanix. Give us maybe a 20-second overview of Nutanix and how it helps the federal government. Then we'll jump into some specifics.
Sure thing, John. So from the top level down, so Nutanix pioneered hyper-converged infrastructure in the early days. What that means is probably less important than why we did it. So the key goals are simplicity, automation, and the ability to run anything, anywhere for our government customers. And so the way hyper-converged infrastructure addresses that is effectively what we're doing is we're taking software intelligence and eliminating hardware dependencies in data centers. And so there's more to follow on that in terms of how we pioneered that and now how that's led to a perfect platform for both hybrid and multi-cloud and ultimately this modern apps era that we see ourselves in now. So we can talk more through that as we go through, but that's the basic. Another good example of hyper-converged infrastructure we used to use in the early days is the iPhone. We're the iPhone for the data center in the sense of you no longer need a Garmin GPS, a Nolta camera. It's all converged into this one very easy to use, automated, simplistic device. And so that's sort of another way of looking at hyperconverged. And we similarly do the same for data center automation.
Yeah, and among the cognoscenti, that's a fancy word, but it's called HCI and pretty well known. And I don't think people realize that you were the pioneers in that and kind of becomes a standard term in many different aspects of the federal government. And I think it was important back 10 years ago, but with the advent of artificial intelligence and larger data sets and mostly with the importance of compliance and security in the federal government, this concept of HCI, it's getting right almost to the center of the discussion, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's been a tremendous amount of change that's come across as we've seen in government as of late with this advent of the need for infrastructure modernization to support this new era of modern apps. So that's another area that Nutanix has been very, very adept at supporting government needs in that arena as well.
I opened with my silly opening about hyper and hyper this, but there's some terms here that some people may get confused about. So we have hyper-converged infrastructure, which is HCI, and we have a hyperscaler. So maybe just for the college students out there, so maybe separate those two for us.
Sure. So hyperscalers, interestingly, hyperscalers we see in the market early days, Google, Azure, Amazon Web Services. These are providers of these massive consumption-based models that are very elastic, allows for the ability to run up the consumption needs based on demand at any given time. And what's interesting about the hyperscalers is the whole concept of how those are built out is designed around this resiliency clustering technology that allows the ability to really run those applications that are residing in those hyperscale platforms, really on any part of the hardware infrastructure and the storage arrays and so forth. And so the parallel there to hyperconvergence is we similarly designed that capability for on-prem in the early days. And interestingly, Nutanix, so if you go back in time and we look at Google in the early days, there was a recognition that to scale out their platform with all the search at the time, which was the big driver in that era, they recognized that the current data center model of the day would not support. They'd be really crushed by the weight of their own infrastructure. It would be not economical. So they put some of their smart guys to the task of coming up with a better design, a better way to scale out their data centers. And they ultimately came up with GFS, the Google File System. And so one of those engineers on that project, and then another from Oracle, very sharp on clustering and resiliency technology, they came together and formed Nutanix. And so the idea was this hyperconvergence was taking the same hyperscaler concept and allowing customers to scale out their applications on commodity hardware. Hardware tends to fail, so the idea is you want to build to adapt, not just to last, and use that software intelligence to allow you to easily scale out, and then with any failure in the hardware, the resiliency and the software intelligence will allow you to fail over without any downtime or any issues in performance in your environment.
Greg, I got a radio background, so I can use the phrase that pays. And as you were speaking, I wrote down on-prem. Well, that's the phrase that pays, because when I think of on-prem, I think of, guess what, of legacy systems. Mm-hmm. And so I think back in the early days, well, let's just say there are organizations that prefer having data stored on premises. And but many agencies also have legacy systems. So you have the cloud, multi-cloud, you have hyper-converged infrastructure, and you have legacy systems. So how does legacy, can you help government agencies make the transition away from this expensive legacy?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great observation and great point. And so really, again, there's the way to characterize from a Nutanix perspective. We look at things in these eras, and there's that old phrase, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, right? And so we've seen many times these legacy environments and these new eras in compute and technology for data centers. And so the environment that we have originally entered the market to address were these legacy data center platforms that had all of these hardware dependencies. So along comes this hyperconverged concept. Nutanix pioneers this. We bring it to market. We address a lot of the security and information assurance needs of the federal government. So we secure a really strong footprint, become a part of a lot of these big central mission programs. And so cloud, of course, is a consideration in many of these instances. And we see this hybrid and multi-cloud model that's become very prevalent that we can certainly talk more about. And I know many of your listeners are familiar with. So hyper-converged infrastructure actually lends itself quite well to hybrid cloud, helping customers make that transition from legacy platforms to a hybrid or a multi-cloud world. So we knew as a disruptive technology, we're coming in and we're disrupting the data center model. There's big competitors in that environment, just like Tesla with automotive and SpaceX with NASA. There's this Uber with the taxi world. So suddenly we see ourselves competing in this environment with very big incumbents that aren't interested in seeing us come in and enter that market. So we knew we had to get it right. We had to make it very simple, very automated, ability to run your apps and data anywhere. And so that was the foundation of how we went about this. And in the process, we built in all these automation features, again, like you see with an iPhone, and this ability to just swipe right and download applications from the App Store, things that took lots of code and intelligence in prior generations. Now we've made this so simple that within minutes and hours, you're standing up virtual instances in your data centers versus the weeks and months that these traditional environments that with all these hardware dependencies tend to take. So that's a great, segue into how that automation we built also allows you to migrate and move your applications, your virtual machines between and across different hypervisors or cloud environments from the same user experience. So that by definition is hybrid cloud. So here we are, wave 2, right in the middle of this hybrid multi-cloud capability that we provide for many of our government customers today.
Because what we're finding out is that the federal government has data that's sensitive, and it may not want to have any connection with the general public cloud or public information. If you can control that on-prem, and then take some of that on-prem capability and give it the scalability that the cloud have within strictures, then that's the best of both worlds, I would think, moving away from an older system.
Absolutely. And certainly security and compliance, the posture, we have to take into consideration the new perimeter, right? We're not just talking about the front door to the bank. I was listening to one of your prior podcasts. I think it was Ron Bashir talking about the examples of security and compliance in this modern app world. And certainly with hybrid multi-cloud, the ability to access from anywhere at any time by anybody from any device, this is the new, and this is going to be a critical consideration around how you're securing your environment.
In front of me, if we do a video, in front of me, I have this piece of paper that says 7th Annual Nutanix Enterprise Cloud Index Report, focusing on the public sector. So why did you guys put this together, and what value does it have for my listeners?
Right. So the Enterprise Cloud Index is a very in-depth interview with the government IT professionals and what's important to them, what trends are we seeing, particularly around what's happening in this AI, Gen AI land rush. We're at the foothills of this super cycle. It's similar to the web era 1.0 we saw back at, the turn of the millennium. And, there's, again, back to the history, not repeating itself, but rhyming. It's very similar to what we're seeing now. But I think we all agree this is going to be significantly larger. And there are going to be so many killer apps that are unleashed through the capabilities provided by Gen AI. We're already seeing this new agentic AI phase and what that represents. And, the ECI report revealed a lot of interesting stats around the government. 94% of U.S. government entities are leveraging Gen AI in some way today, but 76%, that's 3 out of 4, say their infrastructure needs will require significant improvement to support Gen AI. So this is back to your point about legacy systems and how we can help with addressing that. So there's quite a few other revealing details provided in that report. There's a lot of 91%, I believe, of government organizations believe that they benefit from adopting cloud native apps. But what does that tell us, right? So government agencies are going to be looking for solutions to support this next wave that's going to deliver the efficiency, quality, and speed of delivery that they need just to keep up.
Last week, I was at this Billington cyber event, 3-day event, all kinds of smart people. And I heard people debating stuff about, here's a nice debate. What's cloud native? That's cloud native. No, it is cloud native. Well, back and forth and back. And so I'm going to just throw you into the fray here, So what is cloud native, and why? How can that allow a federal government to achieve their goals? Or why would a cloud native application help a federal government leader deploy AI effectively?
Sure. So cloud native is, the ability to run natively in a cloud environment, just as, from a foundational perspective. But the key benefits that we see with cloud native and why it's so important are going to be speed, agility, and portability, right? These are the key ingredients that the government's looking to in terms of supporting citizens, supporting the business level applications required and services that AI is promising to bring to all of us. And it's certainly going to be an accelerator for digital transformation, and certainly in terms of improving mission delivery, right? This is a key takeaway. We have so many examples of customers. As you can see, I know we're on audio, but my screensaver background, one of our customers in the U.S. Navy, the mission support for the hospital ships. And we're talking about an environment that requires a level of efficiency and speed of delivery, disconnected even at sea. And these capabilities are certainly central to the mission in that particular environment. We have other examples with weapon systems afloat where there's been a recognition that the legacy systems of what are required for these systems that are ships that are out there for years at a time before they're brought back to, quote, modernize, and a lot of the proprietary dependencies that are built in and the complexity to upgrade them. They recently undertook the effort to use commercial off the shelf, right, and have more of a commercial stack and a more modern apps capability to allow them to more quickly address mission needs and have the ability to upgrade much faster. As we're seeing in this AI world, I don't know if you've picked up on this yet, but there's a new law. And, it used to be all about Moore's law and the semiconductor, the microprocessor I think 2 years it will double in speed and be half the size or something to that effect. Well, Huang's law, which is, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, is staking a claim that the Gen AI, the chips supporting Gen AI GPU will double in performance to address Gen AI requirements every year. So that just gives you a sense of the delta there and the speed of need for processing with these very data-hungry AI applications.
I see the background behind you. It's a ship. I've talked to a couple of Navy people, and it was a casual conversation. He said, "Yeah, it's really like a floating data center." And looking at it, and you're saying, well, this floating data center is coming back into dock to be reprovisioned, and so then you use the word flexibility. So it's not just flexibility in weapon systems; it's flexibility in infrastructure. And in this case, it's almost a hardware flexibility. But the military has to be flexible as well, and so they have to be able to evaluate a system and know when to move it and change it and upgrade it, and when not to. And so this is, I think, what this hyper-converged infrastructure could allow is just the structure of it allows that flexibility. It's almost part of the package, isn't it?
Absolutely. And in addition to that, getting back again to the roots, we like to talk about hyper-converged infrastructure because those are our roots. We pioneered the tech, and it's again, this ultimate platform for hybrid multi-cloud and now the modern apps era. But getting back to that, the original concept around space, weight, power, we have many examples with government customers where our typical reduction in footprint is about 10 to 1. It ranges from 6 to 16 to 1 reduction in just footprint. So think about that in an environment or an austere environment, forward area, or on a ship where space, weight, power is of the utmost importance that you're able to address. So that certainly is a key point that has put us in place with a lot of these government customers with those types of requirements.
I speak to a lot of people at the Space Force and the DoD, and I get all kinds of great catchphrases from these people, and they do talk about flexibility. But I tell you, the term, if we did like a word cloud on it with generals, the word resiliency is going to be right up there, and maybe more than, because they want that resiliency, especially in the modern combat situations. And so if you provide a solution that can incorporate some of the scalability and flexibility of the hybrid cloud, it's got to be attractive for that military situation.
Absolutely. And again, resiliency gets back to this idea of clustering and allowing you to run your applications on any hardware, on this commodity hardware in the data center. The stories are legendary of Google. I don't even really know if they're 100% true, but I used to hear in the early days about interns on Segway zipping up and down the aisles of a Google data center, and there'd be a flashing light, and it was a hardware failure. And they just pull out that node and drop it in the garbage. It's cheap hardware, and maybe it was fixable, but it's less expensive to pop in a new node, and then the resiliency of the clustering and that file system would just immediately allow failover and bring that node online and start shipping data to it that are coming through all of these systems and applications that Google's running out there. So that's a whole different model than the prior data center approach that we were talking about earlier. And again, that kind of gets back to our own DNA having the same concept with how we scale out our platform for customers as well.
We started this discussion with talking about 10 years ago when you opened that fancy building up in, I think it's still there, Tyson's. Maybe you're recording it from there. Yeah, you're in the building now.
Sitting here right now, yeah.
So put on your future hat and look 10 years down the road from now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't. I won't even. Let's say 5. But it's just so many changes going on in this world. You talked about clusters and nodes, and they're almost like chess pieces that can be aligned all kinds of different ways. So, boomer or doomer or zoomer for AI? You think it's going to benefit the world? Is it going to be more? Is it going to be instance? Is it going to put the reins on it? Or so you've seen a lot. I mean. I'm kind of a middle ground here. I think if it's like when my kids were small, I'd take them bowling with guardrails. Yeah, then they wouldn't have gutter balls all the time. I think it needs some pretty big guardrails here, and I don't know if everyone is using them. And I've seen people be so competitive that they don't care about the guardrails; they just want to succeed, and that could be lead to trouble.
Well, there's certainly quite a bit of risk out there, as we've seen. I mean, you can see DeepSeek as an example, just on the risk side with the importance, for instance, of governance and, organizations and agencies just taking on these AI apps. Everybody was crazy about DeepSeek and it was going to change everything, so much cheaper to do Gen AI than NVIDIA and others. And then within a month, the recognition of the risks of that. What do you do? John, the CISO, calls you up and says, hey, I need to know and understand where we've got DeepSeek deployed or another model, and who, how, and how many. And so that's an area that as we move into the future, we certainly need to be cognizant of. But, putting my finger out on what things will look like in 5 years, I similarly, as just mentioned with that example, have concerns. I think there's a tremendous amount of new opportunity, just like we saw again back to that example of the Web 1.0 era and all those killer apps unleashed by the browser and all these. Of course, there were dozens, hundreds of great problems looking for a solution, the e-pets and e-toys of the world that were part of the big dot bust, but then so many new productivity capabilities, applications, and services that have changed the way we live, the world itself. And again, I think this new era with Gen AI is going to be even bigger than that. It's going to eliminate a lot of jobs for certain. We've seen a lot of data on that. There are experts out there that know more about that than I do. But I think that's going to also unleash all sorts of new opportunity. And, similarly in the horse and buggy era, moving to the automotive, the carriage drivers, they all thought they were going to lose their jobs, but suddenly they're working in factories and building new cars, combustion engines, and there's a whole new set of need out there for the market to pick up an employment to take on. So I think we'll see a little bit of both there. But interestingly, John, there's a book out there, and it's called, that I've been reading. It's AI 2041, and it's exactly the question you're asking, right? This is Kai-Fu Lee. And, he wrote the book AI Superpowers back pretty early, I think 18 or 19. And it was all about China and the U.S. and the dominance, the quest for AI dominance, and, how China skipped over the PC generation and the mobile devices allow so much more rich data collection with telemetry and all this other stuff, and kind of the advantage that gives them. But back to the new book that he's written, along with a movie producer whose name escapes me. But the idea was, let's do these 7 short stories about what life will be like in the year 2041 with AI. And so there's one example that talks about insurance, right? It's a whole AI and insurance and risk profiling. So you have this family, and they're all our personal devices are now in 2041 even more of an ingrained part of our lives. And you drive through a bad neighborhood, your car insurance, you watch on your device, your car insurance is going up as you're driving through a bad neighborhood. There's this whole, it is scary what the potential outcomes will be in that regard in terms of privacy and how it impacts all of us.
Well, let's go backwards and forwards here. I look back to your background. You worked for Netscape for a while, and back when you were at Netscape, you never even realized. I mean, what an explosion! So maybe 10 years from now, we're 2041, whatever happens to be, it'll be something that's unbelievable, I'm sure. And I'm looking at the report, the 7th annual Nutanix Enterprise Cloud. What about the 8th one? What kind of questions? Do we even know what questions 6 months from now? Maybe a whole new set of questions. It may be technology that we can't even conceive now. But I
would say there'll be some quantum mixed in there. That's another hot topic that's certainly, everybody, Cisco, a lot of folks are out there addressing the security, what we see with encryption today and how fast quantum is going to be able to hack that. And so there'll be a lot of interesting topics blended in, I'm sure, with AI at the center of all of it.
Stay tuned for PQE, post-quantum encryption. We're going to do a show on that in 2 weeks, so it's going to get there. Well, this has been a great interview, and I'll keep a link in the show notes to the 7th annual Nutanix Enterprise Cloud Index report, so you can link right there. And we'll see you at one of these events coming up down the road, and we'll see if your predictions come true. We'll hold your feet to the fire here. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Greg O'Connell, Vice President Federal at Nutanix, Nutanix.